to do this?
Oh, good. We didn't record the previous conversation. That's good.
And you know, the nice thing about this is I can see everybody except it's Frank, right? I can't see you, you're hidden, but I know you're there. So we're going to talk about networking tonight. You know that. So we are a small, intimate networking group. But I want to ask you to take out a pencil and paper and jot down how many connections you think you have on LinkedIn. You cannot, I ask that you not look up LinkedIn right now and see how many connections you have, but just take a guess. And then you'll take a look. So, and we're going to do a poll. So using the numbers that you have, Carol, can you put up the poll? Because
I am not able to see the poll. Yvonne, can you
Yes.
check polls from your device?
Yes,
Do you see the poll?
yes.
I
Please.
don't.
Let me launch it.
Yeah,
Okay. All right.
Only hosts can do it.
Okay, so we've overcome technical difficulties already. So would you all add in here? Would everybody fill in how many connections you think you have on LinkedIn? Okay,
If
Yvonne?
mine says plus on there, does that mean, well, anyway, did everybody go?
yeah, so we have a big variety. I want to know who has over 5,000.
And I know that I have about 6,100 because I checked recently. So
Uh-huh.
Wow.
Well, the rest of you, and who has 250 or less? Anybody owning that, or did we just accidentally look at that? It's pretty amazing. I remember when the big goal was to have 500.
Mhm.
Okay, so we're going to stop sharing because everybody knows now that we have a wide variety here. Now, LinkedIn will tell you that the average, worldwide average is 400. If you don't count companies that have tens of thousands, the average number of connections people have on LinkedIn is 400. This group is not necessarily representative, or that number is not representative of this group, which is much broader connections. But their research also says that really you can do the best connecting, have the strongest connections with a group of 100. That once you get past 100, that the connections become looser. Not that you're not connected, but most people can only manage to keep close connections with somewhere between 100 and 140 people. So something to think about as you're thinking about networking and managing your relationships going forward. I can't imagine keeping track of 5,000 or more, but nonetheless, it does give you a big set of connections. And we've built them over time. But tonight, I want to talk a little bit about thinking about connections and networking with the idea that the world has changed in the last 2 years. It's changed for all of us. And I think we need to be mindful of that. Now, when I say for all of us, I want to point out that it's changed even for the Queen of England. 58 years ago, she was inaugurated, and I love this lovely picture of her of a young woman. But I was told by the chief of protocol for the UK in a program earlier this year that for the Queen of England today, she did something this summer that she'd probably never done in the 58 years of her reign. And it was at a reception that the royal family hosted for the G20 leaders. And the Queen of England had to go fetch her own drink. No one brought it to her on a nice little silver platter the way they usually do because of COVID restrictions. Now, I doubt that she found this too upsetting, but I thought when I was putting this program together, it's useful to remember that in ways big and small, we've all been touched by this world and how things have changed. And as we talk about nurturing and building our relationships, it's useful to remember that. I will probably talk about that multiple times today. But now I want to ask you a question. You'll find that I'm full of questions for you. And that is, when you're describing networking, relationship building, building connections, maybe you're talking to a new staff person who's trying to figure out what this thing called networking is about. How would you describe it? Give me 2 or 3 words. Give all of us, please, 2 or 3 words that you put in the chat now of what you think about. How would you describe what networking is, what relationship building, in the sense of in our community, in our businesses? A couple of words in the chat. Okay, I can see that somebody's put something. Connecting. Okay. What else? Conversation. Finding common interests. Boy, that is a strong thing. Support. Getting to know people. Finding win-wins. Recommendations. I would say that all of those things are true. And I want to take a minute and welcome Maya, because we didn't have a chance to welcome you. And I can see you, so I'm waving at you to say hello and thank you for joining us tonight. All daily job security. Yes.
By the way, that's not me. That's another Yvonne.
Ah, okay. Hello, other Yvonne. All right. So all important and good words, right? We would say, and I think we would probably all agree to those words, but I want to add another word and concept to the discussion, because I think that networking is like farming. It is about having the patience to grow those relationships. Why do I have this picture up? This is Panisse lettuce growing at the Singing Farm in Sebastopol. And I love that this lettuce was named for the restaurant Chez Panisse, and that it's so leafy and generous in its size. And that is part of networking, is knowing how to grow things, knowing whether the lettuce wants lots of water or little water, or wants to be close to the other lettuce or far away. And if you think about that, that's how we have to address the people that are in our network. What makes them really comfortable? And I heard somebody talk about this, and they made a point that networking is more like farming and not like hunting. Hunting is going out and finding something and grabbing it in one way or another and bringing it back. And I have a very wonderful, insightful client who said she thought, as we were putting together a program about networking, that one of the challenges that they were dealing with was that the young staff who were just beginning their networking experience thought that networking was like hunting, that if they were sent to an event, they were supposed to go back out and come back, not just with a couple of business cards indicating that they'd been there, but they thought that they had to go and find a client and bring one back every time they went out. That would be hunting. And if you are a young person just going out to represent your firm, that's a daunting task. So part of what she wanted us to convey was hunting is like farming. It takes time and patience. And I suspect with thousands of connections that everyone on this call understands that concept, that we have to be patient and invest time and energy. And that hasn't changed with the pandemic. But yet, I would suggest to you that we need to be more intentional about what we do and how we engage with people. And we certainly need to be curious about where they are today, what they're thinking about. And above all, we need to be flexible in how we engage. I think that's one thing that is most different. 2 years ago, before the pandemic, we kind of knew how to engage with most people. Today, there are lots of differences, lots of different expectations. And for us, those reaching out, It's not always easy to know what are the special things that have happened for somebody in the last 2 years. Good, bad, indifferent, exciting, boring, all those things. How many people have been like the Queen and had to go get their own drink or something similar? We don't know the answers to that, but it would be helpful if we could. I have a suggestion, though, that might help you think about people in a slightly different way. And please do not think I have lost my mind when I start to talk to you about thinking about your colleagues, your contacts, as peaches or coconuts. This comes from some very serious research done for international cross-cultural work to understand how different people around the world build their relationships and are comfortable relating with each other. For us, Americans, and I say all of us because we're all in an American business environment, so some of the American culture rubs off on all of us. But I would confess that I am a peach. And a way of understanding my approach to networking is I am open. I want to have a lot of friends. I'm like a peach. It's easy to get connected to me. And I think that's generally true for most Americans. We're very open and we're actually rather casual. Other people would call what we call friends maybe acquaintances. We talk about, or used to talk about, our friend at the gym, our friend at work, our friend who coaches our daughter's soccer team. And from a work standpoint, we don't require that we have a long-standing relationship with somebody before we'll do a project together. Our attitude is we'll get to know you while we work together. It'll be perfect. And yet, at the heart, there's still a group that we don't casually invite people into. Might be our family. It might be the group that we're still connected with, that we worked with in our very first job, or the people we went to college or grammar school with. There are always some part of our lives where we have dear connections that we don't share easily. But generally, we're welcoming and easy to get to know. In contrast to the coconuts of the world. Now, I just want to point out that I know that ACG is a global organization with a footprint in 9 different countries. And in those 9 different countries, you're going to find a lot of peaches and a lot of coconuts. Now, coconuts take time and energy to get to know. They aren't very receptive at first, but when you can make your way through that outer shell, not only do you find sweet fruit, but you find lots of people that you can connect with because there is a big group inside that shell. Now, I found that out a few years ago when I was working in a company in Paris. And there was a woman that I had a reason to interact with, and I thought she was quite interesting. And she would talk to me, I thought, only because she wanted to practice her English, and we would only have conversations about direct business things. And I could tell that anytime I tried to push that boundary a little bit, the wall was up. But eventually, after months, truly months, she said to me one day, you know, this conversation is interesting. Let's take it offline. Let's have lunch tomorrow. Okay. I thought, well, that's progress. And we went to lunch and it has a happy ending. We had a lovely time. She suggested we have a lunch again the next week, at which point she asked me, why didn't we do this before? And I didn't know what to say to her. You wouldn't really talk to me? But once she crossed that barrier, once I made it through that wall, she introduced me to lots of people. It was fascinating to me. Peaches and coconuts. And think about it. I bet in your world there are lots of different peaches and coconuts. And I'm going to ask you to take a few minutes and we're going to put you in, I think, how many people do we have? Do we have enough to do 2 breakout rooms? I can't see everybody. Yvonne, you're on mute. Who knew that that would be part of our vocabulary?
Yes, we can do 2 breakout rooms.
All right, can we do 2 breakout rooms for about 5 minutes? And would you talk about what you think of this whole notion of peaches and coconuts. I'm mixing up my fruits. As a way to think about how you approach and engage with people. And in your circle, do you recognize these two different kinds of approaches to building relationships? One where it's easy to get started and one where it's difficult. So
Should we just
Sure.
have this discussion? I mean, 2 workout groups sounds like 3 and 3, right? Or 3 and 4.
yeah,
It sounds, it's fine. I'm happy to do the back,
do you want us to all just be one big group? Would you feel better, Frank, if we did
I
that?
think that's easiest. I think that's,
Okay, all right, I'm gonna
and
stop.
I'm happy to go first with what I think. So I'm not shy.
Well,
Okay.
hold on a second, because I'd like to be able to see everybody. So we'd be happy if you would go first and talk about what do you think of this whole idea and how
So
does this relate to people that you engage with?
So I think this is actually a good comparison. The only thing, I think the fruits don't fit, right? So since you brought up the slide and since you explained it, I was thinking we need a fruit that is hard to open but very sticky. Because the way I think about this, and there's a German saying somewhere here, it's in the coconut bit. When you have a case where it's sometimes harder to meet and to get to, the result often is a much closer connection afterwards. So the stickiness is much bigger than the big connection bit, right? Which is like, that's why there's this, the way I differentiate this, and you all have LinkedIn invites already in your inbox. For me, that's why I'm at 6,150.
That's fantastic.
But I mentally, and this may sound rude, but mentally I'm layering things into like an inner and outer circle.
Mhm.
Are associates that I go back to, and sometimes so LinkedIn is pretty awesome and can be a bit of a rat hole, right? So I'm already in Siglinda's LinkedIn, for example. There's this magazine where she's on, so I already took a mental note. I might want to read that later, just from a branding, to understand the branding aspects with it. So I think this is a very good comparison, but it doesn't reflect the importance that actually the hard to crack nuts can become much more sticky and much more important in the long run, as opposed to loose connections, which are also great, because I often have cases where I'm getting introduced to somebody or need to introduce to somebody by way of somebody I know, right? So this indirection at LinkedIn, which works pretty well by basically saying, hey, can you introduce me because I know you well? And I do this much more openly with people I'm close to, which are the coconut people sometimes that were harder to crack and to get to. I don't know whether that makes sense, but
It does make sense. And I think your point about stickiness makes sense too. Although for me in the coconut, it's captured in the big space that I view as being filled with lots of people that you get to engage
I get
with.
it. Yeah, the size. Yeah, that's good. That makes sense.
But you could maybe do this with a pineapple, which would be a little more sticky, but hard to navigate inside. So Maya's, Yvonne, anybody else want to have a comment? Do you have Siglinda? Go ahead, I saw
Sure.
your hand up.
Well, I think you lucked out that there's at least 3 Europeans on this call. We're probably raised as
Absolutely.
coconuts. And
4.
then you adjust more. Okay, so we were raised as a coconut, and then we came here and we had to adjust to be more of a peach. But the other thing is, for me personally, I'm an artist. So as an artist, you're also a public figure. And I feel like I'm a coconut inside a peach, because I can flip this button in my head and I can go out and I easily relate to people and connect with people. But it is in my role as, and that doesn't mean that you get to see the private Siglinda or the whatever that may be. So yeah, there's another nuance there, but I like the the metaphors, the visual metaphors as a visual person.
Oh, good. And I can see that playing that the idea of putting on the role of the peach is really what you do, and you know how to navigate that role. Is that another way of understanding what you're saying?
That would be a good way to put it. Yeah. So then maybe I'm like a peach in a coconut in a peach type thing.
I think
Just
it's
to make it
actually-
really complex now.
Multi-layered. Does
It's gonna
anybody
call
else
it-
have a comment? Because I have a question I want to ask all of you, but I want to get your comments first. Okay.
Maybe go ahead.
When you think about the people that are in your networks,
Ming was raising her hand.
Ming, I didn't see you. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I find that I was probably a coconut, but since in order to navigate all the networking here in the US, you really have to be more of a peach. And with experience, I shifted from being a coconut to a peach, which made it a lot easier just to connect with people and to find common interests with
Yeah,
those
it's actually
connections.
a very cultural thing. I think Sieglinde put it perfectly with the Europeans here. I mean, you even have language differences. In Germany, you have two different words to address people who are close to you or who are not, right? Just in the way of interaction, which is if you arrive at the do, you actually have cracked the nut to a certain extent, and you are like more, you're now two coconuts talking to each other. but it's really a cultural difference. And Ming, I mean, it's for me, it was a learning experience coming to the US to do this. And Sieglinde is nodding her head too. I mean, it is very culturally dependent on how you navigate this.
So I think that all of you might be interested in the book called The Peach and the Coconut, A Guide to Collaboration for Global Teams. Not that you necessarily would learn anything specific from it that you don't always already know, but you just might be interested in reading through it. It's a small little book, and seeing how somebody else explains it. It also occurred to me while you were talking, Frank, about the language difference, that it's certainly one way, if you're a coconut, of making sure that people know where they are in relationship to you, and when you choose to take them into your circle by changing the pronouns that you use.
One comment I would make, just as an American, is a peach and has always been a peach, and you know, the American on the ground that works for an international company where I've got a lot of colleagues coming over. I think it's also a mistake to assume that you have to be a peach to do well in the US business environment, or rather that all Americans are peaches, if that makes sense. I definitely agree with the sentiment that I've had colleagues that have moved over from Europe to the US and have become more like peaches, but I think there's also a lot of really successful inward facing business people in the US that don't gravitate towards that are more difficult to get to know, and probably go along with Frank's sentiments that maybe the fruit's a bit more sticky inside.
I think that's a really great point, and thanks for bringing it up. I just raised this issue more to have you think about. This has been a great discussion. Also to have you think about it as you encounter people today, as another way to think about what your approach to them might be. Do they strike you as peachy or like coconuts? And do you have to adapt in some way as you seek to connect with them? So
maybe another way, thinking of what Maya said, I agree, but having lived on both coasts of the US, I would say that I would think that the East Coasters are more of the coconut nutters and the Californians are more of the peaches. And I know that I'm really generalizing this, but overall, if I had, that would be my point of view.
Yes, and I think I would agree with you. And it reminded me of getting in the elevator with a friend of mine from New Jersey. And as I got in the elevator wherever we were, I said hello to somebody that I obviously didn't know because we were getting in an elevator. And she said afterwards, "You Californians, you just talk to everybody."
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
so
almost embarrassed now to go out to the grocery store in Belgium because I say hello to everybody. So it's true.
yeah, I was in a meeting earlier today and Ming was there where one of the fellows was talking from the Netherlands was talking about how shocked he was when he first came here. And somebody in the grocery store greeted him. And then when he goes back to the Netherlands, he's kind of disappointed that no one says hello. So,
Or how are you?
Yeah, but don't answer that question if you're here because, for Americans, hello, how are you is a greeting, not so much really a question. But let's move ourselves a little bit forward and talk about where we are today. This is my, oh my God, it's March 16th, 2020. We are in the world of Zoom slide. And that is how I think I felt, and a lot of us felt as though we were being pulled into a world we didn't know and didn't know what to do with. So cast your mind back a little bit and think about what it was like then. We all showed up in t-shirts and sweatshirts. So some people didn't bother to comb their hair and gentlemen certainly didn't shave. And you once in a while would find yourself in a Zoom meeting with somebody who was sitting on their bed, which hadn't been made because they forgot that the camera would show more than their face. But I think we have adapted. We know words like you're on mute and how to use them. And I was in a meeting recently where there were gentlemen with coats and ties on, and there was not a sweatshirt or a t-shirt to be seen. We've adapted to this world of screens and being in little boxes like we are tonight. We've learned that it's probably not best for your reputation to be seen eating a bag of Cheetos and licking your fingers and wiping your hand on your shirts if you want to be seen as professional and someone that everyone wants to talk to, that we miss some of the things that we had before we were pushed into a world of Zoom. We miss the few minutes talking before a meeting, and we miss a few minutes talking after a meeting. Think about how nice that was. But today, you're in a Zoom meeting and everybody is so worried about the next meeting that as soon as the clock ticks toward 5 o'clock or 4 o'clock or whatever the end point is, then the host hits end meeting for all and you are back wherever you are by yourself, wondering what would have happened if you could have had a little more of a conversation, if you could have walked down the hall to see some of the other people in the office. I often hear salespeople complaining that it's hard to get that next connection because you can't connect with anybody so casually and get known. But that is the world we are part of. And yet, we're beginning to come out of that box. But one of the things we're hearing is that people aren't really sure how to navigate the world outside our familiar Zoom box. It has a certain element of safety in it. You just show up as you are. You have a virtual background or not. And you know that not much is expected of you except whatever is on the agenda. And yet, we're about to go back out into the world where we are engaging with people in person. And everyone seems to have a different idea about what that should be like. As much as we miss some of the niceties, some of the warmth, some of the being able to connect, to actually touch somebody else in a business sense, to send the messages that we are connected and cooperating. Now, when we think about a handshake, we think, well, should I extend my hand? Will they accept it? Heaven forbid you reach to somebody and want to hug them. Remember the days when you could go to I bet in many an ACG meeting, there was lots of hugging as a greeting because people knew each other. You were happy to see each other. And yet today, you're never sure. That's one of the challenges right now, is not being sure. Does anybody remember at one of the early times when we weren't locked down for a few minutes, that there was a big trend to wearing these bracelets? Do you remember these multicolored silicone bracelets? For a while, they were a very big deal. We weren't unlocked down for long enough. But the idea was you wouldn't have to ask somebody if you could shake their hand. They'd wear a bracelet. If it was pink or red, keep your distance. If it was green, come and shake hands. Blue, oh my goodness, come and give me a hug. Or yellow, I haven't decided. But the problem was people would wear a bracelet and then you'd have to go around and look at people's wrists to figure out before you greeted them. It wasn't really a very efficient way. Today, I think one of the challenges is knowing how to greet somebody and how to be prepared for their idea of greeting to not match your own. Have you had the experience? How many of you have started doing in-person meetings? Hands, show of hands. And how are they going? Is it easy to greet people? Is it awkward? Have I just been talking to people who are?
I like it. I like it,
Oh,
Frank.
do not do this. Do not, that is my least favorite. I'm not very tall. And if you come at me with your elbow, the chances are it's not my elbow that you're going to connect with.
No, you're always very conscious. You look at the person, right? So it's actually the greeting works just as good over Zoom, right? And we do this, and sometimes a lot of people do this, but very seldomly it's a handshake.
I know, ladies.
And
what
then
do you
actually
think?
a lot of people, instead of handshakes, we hug. Literally, because we haven't seen each other for a long time.
I know. Okay.
Especially with people we work closely with on Zoom.
Which is lovely. And Siglinda, you've got your hand waving.
Oh no, it's like I really don't see the issue, but maybe I hug, I shake hands, I really don't care. And I guess when you as a person don't care, it makes everything a lot easier. And it's kind of like what Frank is saying, you kind of feel it out. And sometimes I say, it's like handshake, no handshake. and you laugh it away. It's no big deal for me.
That's great. And I think your approach is kind of, you're very warm and in your greeting, so people know that if they're not comfortable, they won't offend you in a dramatic way if they say not today.
Exactly. And I am not offended. It's what oh my God, we got so many restrictions already. Let everybody just be whatever they want to be right now. And that makes it easier.
And I think you just touched what I think is the most important thing to think about in networking these days, is that everybody's had so much that accepting them for who they are. One of the fellows that I know talks about meeting people where they are today, letting them be who they are. If you approach with that idea, then it creates such a great relaxed environment that it is supportive and strong for everybody. Maya, did you have something to say? I wanted to check.
I was just going to say, I just say hi when I meet people for the first time now. I don't think it's that big of a deal. Unless someone's a close friend, I don't go in for a hug anymore. I think actually that's...
You better prepare yourself when I see you next, Maya. That hug is coming.
Yeah, I mean, I think unless I'm really close with someone, I actually wouldn't want someone getting to, hugging me unless we're it's someone that I've got a close relationship with. Whereas in the past, I would, hug everyone, or there would be kisses on the cheeks, and
yeah. And I think that's true for a lot of people. There's a mix of how close you have to be and what the right circumstances are. And to me, the most important thing, reason to talk about it at all, is to remember that everybody may not have the same feeling you do, and be prepared for somebody to maybe step back or offer that elbow or that fist bump when you're starting to go for a hug. It's about being thoughtful and aware of the other people. But if I'm crazy about this a little bit, so let's shift gears and talk about ways that we have connected with people, tools we've used as I think about it. And we're past Halloween, so we are now in pre-Christmas. And I suppose that all of us in one way or another are thinking about gifts. And I would ask you to think about gifts maybe a little bit, how you choose them, maybe a little bit differently than you have before. I heard a talk by a fellow Eric Lippert, who has a corporate gift program. And he said there are 7 questions that you should ask. And I am not going to read them aloud to you, but I think the first 4 are really the most important. And it was striking to me that budget for him is at the bottom. Now he works with heads of state, heads of government, corporate gift giving programs, and people like all of us, the full range of budgets. And for him, that's the least of the questions. But the others are, especially the first 4, who, why, and what's the message? And then for me, is it culturally appropriate? And we could all probably tell some stories about gifts that are not culturally appropriate. And as a guide to figuring out what gifts you're going to give. The +1 for me is, after I'd started doing this, I realized there's a wrinkle in gift giving these days. And that is, where do you send the gift? Assuming that you're not going to see everybody. We've never seen everybody that we were going to give a gift to, especially in a business sense. They're often sent to the office, but are people in the office or are they at home? And how do you figure that out? Somebody was sending me something and they simply sent me a note and said, what's the best address to get something to you? And I thought, what a nice way to say, are you in the office? Are you home? If you're home, working from home, will you reveal your address to me? So I think that is a great way to find out, where can I send the gift to you that it's going to get to you? Not to make an assumption that everybody's back in the office, or the assumption that everybody would want to share their home address. I thought it was a good way to have a middle ground. So 7 questions +1 to think about as you're putting together your gift list. And one other thing I think about with gifts right now is to keep a record of what you've given people, so that you aren't racking your brains or trying to find an old list, but have a way of seeing what you gave people before, so you don't duplicate and don't drive yourself crazy either. And you might keep a record of what they sent you too. A lot of record keeping for the moment. Now, one of the gifts we used to give people was food. We take them to lunch or breakfast or dinner to celebrate for a holiday. And we can do that with some people now, but some people are reluctant, or it gets complicated. Can we eat inside? Can we eat outside? Where does it have to be? Will you drive? So don't forget that there are ways to share a meal with somebody, even when you're not together. For one meeting I did, we sent everybody a DoorDash certificate so that everybody could order lunch that they wanted. And then we all had our lunch and had our meeting, and it worked very well. And there are, I don't have to tell you, everyone on this room knows there are lots of deliveries from all over the world. You can send all kinds of food that people will enjoy. Even the old-fashioned company, Harry and David, that sends gift baskets of a different fruit every month or once a quarter as a way to say to somebody, I'm thinking about you, even if we aren't talking and we aren't doing any business together right now, but I want you to know that I still remember you. But more interestingly to me, and easier in a way, is simply remembering people. LinkedIn is very useful for reminding us about the birthdays of our contacts and the work anniversaries. And if you follow people on LinkedIn, you can find important things that are happening for them. But also, most of you probably know a few things, especially about that first 100 people that you know. I know that one of my clients is a rabid, crazy San Francisco Giants fan. And I do not follow baseball at all, except during the season to occasionally touch and check in to see what the Giants are doing so I can send her a note and check in with her about her favorite thing in the world so that she knows that I remember her. And we may not do a project one year and we'll do two the next, but it's a way to keep in touch. And I heard I'm always looking for the best way to keep track of the things that I know about the people who are in my network. I heard recently about a guy who has 50 people that he follows. And every quarter, his goal is to touch base with each of those 50 people. And he has a big spreadsheet, I'm told, with all the information that he has about each of those people. So he knows their birthdays and who their favorite author is, and what teams they follow, or if they hate sports, and what topics they are following. So he can find articles and collect them and send them to them. So I'm curious to know if any of you have big spreadsheets that allow you to keep track of people, or do you keep it on your phone, or do you have a way of keeping track of what people might like who are already in your network? So Frank, I bet with your 5,000 connections, you have some way that you keep track of at least a portion of them.
You know, I use a tool called Contacts Plus. And they have a couple of elements. So it's a contact manager. It's allowing me to import business cards. They actually have a service up to a certain number of cards. They will actually visually check that the scan is okay. And what I like about it are the updates. It gives you actually network updates. It tells you how these people had network updates. And then it connects to the different groups like LinkedIn and so forth, and keeps your different databases in sync. And you see when somebody changes jobs and so forth. So that's a tool I use. And I mean, it's part of my job to network, because I'm a Cadence spokesperson for some areas, and I'll do a lot of interaction. I do a lot of LinkedIn posts very specifically to promote things and so forth. So that's how I keep track, and I'll make it actually like a calendar entry often, that I'm like half an hour spending just on checking on people on LinkedIn, and then on Contact Plus, what happened, and see people moving around. What I'm missing is a feature I would want. I kind of would want to be able to categorize them easier into this inner circle and outer circle, as I mentioned, right? So kind of like my business family and then my business associates, right? That would be good to have, but I have no formalized ways of doing this. It's just typically me remembering the people then.
It makes me think right away is there would be some way to color code it so you could see.
Yeah, exactly. And I think Contact Plus, actually, I could categorize it in Contact Plus, but I haven't done that yet. I mean, I'll just spend a certain time per week on just what I refer to as active networking, right? So which is I literally have this on my task list every day. I have like a little entry LinkedIn networking, if you will, to just look at posts, just to stay in tune and touch with announcements and so forth. I see from others.
Great, thank you. Anybody else? Yvonne, do you have a special way of keeping track? Because you must have lots of people.
I don't, but I do have especially for my inner group, or whoever is relevant at the moment. I have a pretty good memory when it comes to those kind of things.
It's a German thing.
It's a German thing. But I did take a note of Contact Plus. I really like the idea of having something more and having tools, because I am getting older, and if it's not written down, it doesn't always stick. But it's just I guess because I talk so much to people, that in conversation it comes up, and then a memory pops up, and then I remember. But I need to make it more of an effort to reach out more.
Yeah, and there's actually potentially, you may know this, Lainey, as you're like actively living this. LinkedIn changed their behavior a little bit, and perhaps Sieglinde, as you're an artist and creator there, you may have a view on this. There's a difference between followers and contacts in LinkedIn, right? So there's, I mean, Yvonne, just to write you out here between Germans, from your activity on your link profile, it says you have 1,520 followers. And I bet you that number is different from your contacts, because there are certain people following you that are not a contact. So that's one differentiation. So for certain people, I actually sometimes decide, oh, I just want to follow this person. And then they show up in my feed. Then when I like what they do or what they see, then I'll try to establish a contact or get to be introduced, right? Which is like 2 levels of separation. But then once you're a contact, there is like Yvonne called it the inner circle, right? You want to have these people, and I'm like Yvonne. That's why I was only halfway joking about the German thing. At any given point in time, there's a set of things in my head. So I would love to formalize that as I too get older, to figure out how to formalize that a little bit.
Okay, thank you. That's a good piece of information for all of us, the Contact Plus. Maya, Ming, Sieglinde, anything you'd like to add to the, Maya? You unmuted yourself, so yes.
I was going to say,
Sure.
I think I have a similar system to Yvonne, where once I talk to someone again, I remember stories that they told me, especially if they're something unique, if they have a hobby, place they were traveling to.
That's great. And you just confirmed what people always talk about. If you tell a story, people will remember more than if you just say a few words. So we should all keep our storytelling going. Ming, you unmuted. So did you want to add something?
Yeah, I don't have a formalized system either. I rely a lot on my memory, and the stories really help. I try to note down people's families, especially children, and how old the children are, because there's usually a connection. Since I have kids, as you know, there is a lot in common when you have kids, and at what age or how old are their kids, and to understand more their personal situation and build that connection.
That's a really good point. Whether it's children or a hobby or where you went to school or anything that could be a common shared bond is really important to remember. So each one of us does it, and we're all now, Contact Plus is going to wonder why they have a pop in interest later tonight, and it's all thanks to Frank.
Just check it out.
They send you a thank you note.
There's another thing there, which you just brought up. There's this, one of the things I actively do is when interacting with people, I do look at the previous job history to find overlap to people I know and so forth, right? So, oh, you also work there and there, or you were in this and that industry, right? So that's why LinkedIn is actually an amazing source to establish, what's the right English word, to establish immediate close proximity, because you have like, you find some common ground that you can reference, and hey, oh, you went to University of Berlin, you know this and that person, right? So those are things I'm doing to kind of personalize it. That's a better way to personalize it immediately, right?
That's a great tip. Thank you. And I see that we are well past our time. So I will just say that it's been great sharing with you all of this about building our networks, maintaining and keeping them, and growing them, hopefully, which thanks to Frank, all of our networks have grown today. Thank you very much for reaching out to all of us. You move the numbers on the needle, for which we will be grateful, and we can find you forever now. And I just encourage you to be intentional, curious, and flexible as we go forward. And thank you for spending the time with us today. And I will be happy to connect with you at any time and look forward to sharing more time with you as we go forward. So thank you again. And Yvonne, thank you very much for organizing everything for us.
I appreciate the effort you have put into this and the time you have spent with us. And Lainey, if those of you who don't know her, Lainey is an absolute amazing person. And more than once, I haven't met her personally thanks to COVID, but more than once when I've talked to her, she remembered exactly what we talked about. Like, I had issues with my kitchen and she asked me the next time, how did that go? Did you resolve it? So she definitely has this down. So we can only hope that we'll get as far as you have in regards to getting the skills down. So thank you all for joining us tonight. You'll be the first to hear. So we are having a happy hour that we've had published a few times before, but today we finally made a decision on what to do. It will be virtual. It is so hard to find places to meet at in an organized way. So it will be virtual, and it will be a wine tasting. So right before the holidays, join us for this wine tasting. It's going to be fantastic. 6 different California wines. Don't miss it. Join us. It will be a great time. And we'll have something up our sleeves. Lainey, thank you again so very much. Everyone, I'll connect with each one of you. Ming, I think you're the only one I don't know in the round. But everyone else, or Ming too, I hope to meet you in person one day. And thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.